So, thank you, everybody. I know it's kind of crowded. I know it's early. I assume some of you were out late last night, so thanks for showing up first thing in the morning. I'm Daniel Kogan. I'm a program manager in SharePoint back in Redmond, and this is Jeremy.
I'm Jeremy Kelly. I work with Dan, another program manager, and my first feature on SharePoint was Content Search Web Part for the 2013 release.
Okay, fine. If we're gonna, my first feature on SharePoint, no.
He built taxonomy, so that's really
I did taxonomy. Cool. Anybody? Yeah. I won't confess to any of the other features I built because I might not get as much applause. Okay, so we talked clicker, thank you. We talked a little bit about sort of the high-level topics. Let's just sort of get right into it and see if my clicker works. It does. So this morning, we're going to talk about NextGen portals. We're not going to go very deep into each portal. I mentioned this for those of you that were in the room. We're going to use the NextGen portals sort of as examples to illustrate some of the technology and some of the engineering decisions that we made when we went and implemented them. So you'll learn about them, but this is not a tutorial on how to use a video portal. It's not a tutorial about how to use publishing pages and so on. This is really, let's look at a scenario, then let's talk about how we implement. We're going to look at video, we're going to look at microsites and codename Infopedia. We're going to look at the new blogging tool, and then we're going to have a bit of a sneak peek into some of the things that we're thinking about in the future, and Q&A. I'm not sure. I'm hoping that we'll be able to have actually quite enough time for a fair bit of Q&A. We're going to be a little bit tight, but we're going to try our best because I think there's going to be a lot of questions about sort of strategy and implementation and schedules, and other people had all sorts of questions. So with that, let's start. Some of these you've probably seen already during the conference. The NextGen portal family of portals. We have the O365 video, which released, we announced it about a year ago. It's released over the last year. This week, it's actually 100% live. So everybody that has an O365 tenancy should have one. Delve, you guys all know Delve. It's the big thing. It's in media everywhere. Everyone's talking about it. Infopedia is this notion of the NextGen knowledge management portal that we want to implement in O365 for all our tenants. What's most important about this notion of a NextGen portal is really sort of we build them on top of a lot of value add that we have in the service, right? So we have OneDrive, we have Skype and Outlook. We have all these pieces of technology, and what we wanted to do is effectively what you folks already do at your businesses. Try and take all these technologies and mash them together and build the scenarios out. And the way that I talk about this is we've sort of done, someone earlier was asking about A/B testing. And the way I think about it is, well, we've done this experiment for like the last 14 years, where we watch you folks build this stuff, and we said, there's no reason for you to have to keep building a lot of this. We know the patterns. We see what people do. We understand the scenarios. We're going to build them. We're going to build them for you. We're going to deliver them in ways that you guys are just going to be able to use them out of the box in the service. So what makes it a NextGen portal? Well, it's this notion that it's ready to go, out of the box. We deliver it for you. So who can make them? We make them. Microsoft implements the NextGen portals and delivers them as solutions in O365 for you. How do you get one? When we finish one, when they're ready, when we feel like they have the value that customers would expect, it will light up in your tenancy. If you are signed up for first release, you'll get it earlier. If you're just a tenant that's going to wait until it's all nice and stable and ready to go, one morning, Monday morning, you'll see a NextGen portal show up, and you can choose to use it or not. And so the other big question is, are these enterprise ready? Absolutely. They're on our service, so in O365, the substrates that we use underneath are all things that are super enterprise scalable and performant. So we're really confident. There is one sort of gotcha in all this when people say, well, you build me a solution and you don't really know what I want. And I say, well, actually I do. I think for the last 14 years I've been watching you. But you, yeah, especially you. No. So the reality is, though, we accept that it's not going to be 100% for 100% of our customers. We get that. And so we do believe that there's going to be some need and some space for doing custom work, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. It's not really the ready-to-go portal anymore. It's this notion of custom, and we'll address that near the end of the session. So those are sort of the high-level, what is a NextGen portal, why do I care, what do we do with them? When we went about building a portal, we start thinking about your requirements. And like I said, we're pretty confident that we get most of the baseline requirements. We have the platform, we have your requirements, and we build a portal. I was trying to figure out a way to explain this distinction between the custom stuff and what you do today versus the NextGen portal. And so I thought, rather than building portals, which you guys all know a lot about and probably build more portals than I do, to be honest, I said, imagine that we're building a camper together. So we have these requirements, and we have a platform. And what you've done today is this custom thing where you go out and you build your own camper. And they're super cool, right? Don't get me wrong, right? Some of you guys have done some amazing work, and they really meet your needs. But they're custom, and there's complications that go along with custom, like trying to find spare parts for them or trying to find a mechanic that knows how to do it, and so on. And so what we're suggesting in the NextGen portals is saying, why don't you just leave it for us? We're going to deliver a NextGen portal for you. They're ready to go. You have manufacturer's warranty. You get the latest technology all the time. And it's not custom, so there's no wood paneling really on the outside of this one. But it's probably good enough, if not better, than what most people are going to do most of the time. It is not going to be the super deluxe, all singing, all dancing thing that you would have designed if you had unlimited resources and unlimited time. But most of you don't, right? So that's my philosophy around sort of the difference between do-it-yourself and ready to go. There's nothing wrong with custom. Ready to go is an easy way to get started. So the way I think about these portals is, out of the box, they're pretty straightforward. There's no installation required on your part. They just work. They understand the context that you're in because it's an O365 and authenticated users and so on and so on. You just work. Vanilla, first day, it should just run. Then I think about, well, at some point you're going to want to configure them, right? And so you're going to want to go and do a few things to them, add some branding and maybe change some permissions around and move the content hierarchies to match the way you think about your content and your business. And so I talk about it as out of the box and configure. And then the next step is, well, what if I want to extend my portal, right? At some point, my portal needs to do more than just the out-of-the-box thing and change the color. And so I would imagine a world where you're going to be able to go, put your own controls in, put different controls that we deliver, get controls from third parties, build your own controls, and add them in there. But it's not the same thing as going and changing the list schema. You're not going to go and add some business logic to an event receiver on a page. That's not what we're talking about. I'm really talking about adding controls to the surface that the authors work on. And then the last step is, frankly, I don't know what you guys are going to do. Right? You guys can go crazy, do custom stuff, do whatever you need to do. Frankly, it's up to you at that point. And so whenever we talk about this, both Jeremy and I are going to be pretty explicit about the language we use. So configure to me is stuff that you do in my UI. Extend is going to be things that you add to your pages through a well-understood model that we're going to provide. And then custom is pandas humping trees. I don't know. You get to do whatever you want when you go custom. So the advantages of building these things on SharePoint. The way I think about it is, the same reasons you build your websites and your portals on SharePoint is the reasons I build my NextGen portals on SharePoint, right? There's just a ton of value add already in the system that you don't want to have to go and rebuild and re-implement and reimagine how to do data protection and backup and recovery and all that kind of stuff we give you. It's not the same thing as saying we expose it all from day one and we confuse the user with these big, long menus of which we used to do. Now we're just going to say, hey, we have all this as back end to the system, and we're going to expose them as we need them per scenario in the NextGen portals. So with that, I'm going to ask Jeremy to talk a little bit about sort of the new model that we have around the portals.
Cool. So the way I like to think about it is we're building these pretty much the same way you've built all of your solutions today. It's just that we're finally catching up to the same techniques and strategies that you're using. So if we look at the base of our next-gen portals, we've got the site collections for content storage, and we've got server REST APIs coming out of SharePoint. So this is our bedrock. Our foundation is really all the stuff that we've gotten a ton of value out of over the years and that we're going to use to build all the new stuff. When we've started building our new components, we started with a couple pieces. We know that pages in SharePoint are problematic. The model of web parts and zones and master pages and page layouts, it goes on. And when you want to just build a page that looks really good out of the box, it can be really daunting. So we started with a page renderer and an authoring canvas that will really help get you to a point where, without effort, your content authors can create pages that are going to work across devices and look great. On top of that is where we're delivering these vertical portals solutions. So we've got Office 365 video that we've talked about. We've got the microsites. We've got Codename Infopedia. And we've got blog, which we're going to talk about more later. It feels less like a portal, but I promise you it'll be important. And so these are, like I said, these are the vertical application spaces that we're delivering these next-gen portals into. And we think it's going to cover a pretty wide range of your needs. Sound good?
So we had a bunch of people ask a few minutes ago, and you seem to have forgotten one part.
Right. So custom. Obviously, we think custom's important. And part of the reason we're talking about the architecture today is so that when you build your custom portals, we can offer you the same services. So keep that in mind as we go throughout the demos and other stuff. These are the patterns, these are the techniques that we think that you're going to want to use in your custom as well as how we build the new stuff. First, we're going to talk about Office 365 video, though. So it's our first portal, new next-gen portal that we released. It's, as Dale said, just this week we've gone 100% worldwide to all production tenants. I think government and some of the other SKUs are still coming, but at least for e-SKUs, you should all have video portal at this point.
Who's using video portals? Nice.
Cool.
Great.
So hopefully, if you know anything about the video portals and why they were really important, they're powered by Azure Media Services. So this is a great first step at us delivering SharePoint portals powered by some really awesome technology from Azure Media Services. And we'll see exactly how that works in a second. We wanted to make the video portal easy to consume, right? We wanted these pages that just come out of the box. They work on mobile. We've got an iOS app. We're working on responsive design pages for the video portal as well. We wanted it to be your everything in one place video destination. So people don't have to remember the magical URL for whatever custom video portal you had to deliver. It's in the app launcher, so it shows right up, and people can find it really easily. It's great for sharing broadly. You know, we call this YouTube for the enterprise. I know someone tweeted the other day that YouTube is the YouTube for the enterprise, but we actually think if you're already in SharePoint, why go somewhere else?
People tweet?
They do.
Okay.
They do. Other people do.
Other people do. I don't tweet. Okay.
You don't tweet. So these, again, they're rich, they're discoverable, they're social experiences. In the video portal, you've got Yammer built right in so that you can have conversations. Makes it really easy to share as well. And I think the killer feature of the video portal that we were able to deliver is secure and easy to manage. By leveraging the Azure Media Services, we're giving you encrypted video on the back end and encrypted over the stream as well as being adaptive streaming. You don't have to go and manage all the different file types, all the different resolutions that you might want to deliver your content around the world. The Azure Media Services is going to do that for you. So let's take a quick look at what the Office Video Portal looks like. I saw a lot of hands go up, so you're probably familiar with the video portal. But again, we're going to go through this, and as I do each of the demos, keep in mind I'm going to call out the architectural pieces that we're going to talk about from a tech point of view more than from just a feature walkthrough. So this is the Office 365 video portal homepage. You can see at the top I've got some videos that are highlighted. I've got different channels here that are listed. We've got the popular channel, which is powered by analytics, and over time is going to involve more graph work as well. So that's a system-generated view of videos that are popular in the system. And then we've got the other channels down below that an admin has configured. So again, there's no go into edit mode, go to a web part, change the properties. There's a configuration page behind the scenes that lets you easily highlight which videos are here. These channels are then each divided. So a channel is a site collection. One of the things that we've done is actually work on our provisioning code quite a bit so that we can provision site collections very quickly and make them near real time for you to use and give you a lot of flexibility and benefit. And we'll come back to the storage model after we get through with the demo. So within the channel, I get kind of the same features I had on the home page. A channel owner can configure the spotlight videos at the top, and then we get a feed of the popular, all the videos, and the videos that you own as well. If we tap on through, maybe, we'll try mousing on through. What's going on? There we go. So we get to the actual video page. Again, Azure Media Services is where the streaming is coming from. Even though this is an agent SharePoint, it's running on top of SharePoint, the video delivery, and trust me, there is actually a video there, it just stays on that shot for a while.
It's a video of chairs, and so chairs don't do a whole lot, so it's not,
yeah,
not the most exciting video.
I didn't set up the context really for all of our demos. We are Contoso Design, we're a furniture company.
But you'll
really
see the video.
You'll see it, it'll all work.
If the chair moves, let us know.
So again, like I said, we've got Yammer built right in, so I've got a Yammer panel that'll come up, and if I signed in, I'd actually see the feed of comments about this video from throughout Yammer. It all gets aggregated together. I've got share links. The You Might Also Like is powered by the graph as well, so it knows a lot about the content relationships between the people and the other content to give you content that's really useful, again, without someone having to program a page or a web part to do that. All right, I think that's a good quick overview of the video portal. So let's talk about some of those architectural pieces behind the scenes. Quicker. So storage, right? Storage is a really big, important part, especially for the video portal where we've kind of got two storage mechanisms going on. We chose SharePoint site collections as the back end, right? It's the same thing that you're all using when you build a new portal. It's scalable. When we need to load balance the server and say, I need to bring up a new database, what am I going to do? The site collection is our unit of scale. And so by choosing that as our breakdown as opposed to one giant site collection with a bunch of lists or libraries to make up this entire corporate portal, we said that we really want to devolve these channels, and we'll see how that pattern fits for microsites.
So, Jeremy, if these are site collections, that's great, right? I'm going to go in, site settings.
No.
It's SharePoint, right?
The whole pitch for the ready-to-go next-gen portals is that we're actually hiding a lot of the traditional SharePoint UX. We're leveraging the value for you. So all the stuff you're going to see is going to give you all the things that you expect out of SharePoint, but with a new user experience on top of it that makes it a lot easier to use. So it's the tried and true container model for SharePoint. They're created on demand. Like I said, we've worked a lot on the provisioning code for site collections so that we don't just have a giant bucket that's eating up a bunch of resources in the background. When you create a channel, it goes in provisions, and it's pretty quick right now. They're also compliant, right? So all of your e-discovery services that you use already will work against those site collections. You just need to give it the path. So if you're doing document holds and other stuff, especially when we look at microsites, more so than video, I'm not the e-discovery guy, so I'm not as familiar with what you would want to do there. But microsites, Infopedia, blogs, all that stuff just works. If we look at how we've broken this down, so like I said, we're using this across the spectrum of portals, and so when we create these sites, when you create a video channel, you're actually getting all the stuff that's necessary for that to be a microsite or a blog or any of these next-gen portals on the back end. So we've got a library for page data. We've got a library for image data. We've got the videos, which are backed by Azure Media Services, and we'll see that in a second. And then we've got the settings. So all of those settings, those configurations, are user data that we're storing in a library inside of SharePoint. If we take a quick look at the components that are there, we've got this thing called the hub. The hub is provisioned one per tenant, and that powers all of our application pages. So all of the actual UX rendered pages come out of the hub, and then you've got those site collections with the channels. On the Azure side, you've got your compute, your blob storage, your table storage. All that stuff powering the video portal you don't have to worry about. You never have to see it to know that it's actually powering your system. We've got a timer job that actually keeps things in sync. So as we add or remove videos from the SharePoint side, we run a sync job. It sends the information over to Azure, which sends us back the encoding and thumbnail events and all the metadata that we need out of Azure. So Dan, why don't you walk us through what a user is actually going to experience with all that?
Okay. So from the end user's perspective, when they use the media service, well, when they use the video portal, they're actually using a combination of the Azure Media Service and SharePoint. They won't know. They shouldn't notice a difference. For us, it was a big engineering decision as to how we were going to plumb through the storage, whether we're going to keep the videos in SharePoint, whether we're going to put the videos in Azure, what that meant. And we actually decided that we wanted to have a copy of the video in SharePoint because that's a place where we can control all the sort of content management aspects, right? ACLing and scheduling and audits and all that kind of stuff. But we wanted to make sure that we could stream it from Azure in the adaptive streaming that Azure provides for us. And so we ended up with sort of hybrid model that allows us to interact with SharePoint, but in the back end it's Azure and the user won't notice. So imagine that the user comes in, they upload a video. They are really uploading to SharePoint. Once they do that, the SharePoint environment is going to take the video and give it to the Azure service. Azure transcodes because they want to have several different versions of that video depending on bits that are going to have to go across the wire and so on for depending on how good your bandwidth is when you choose to stream and so on. They also do the thumbnailing for us and they do a few other things. They give us back a pointer. So in SharePoint, what you end up with is the original video as well as a pointer to the video in Azure and the thumbnail that Azure gave us. So in the video portal, you saw on the page the thumbnail from Azure, a link. The link is going to go to SharePoint. The SharePoint system is going to say, oh, if you want that video, we're going to ask Azure to stream that video for you. And so the end user is actually going to get a stream from Azure even though they requested a SharePoint resource. The resource is in SharePoint. And so when you say delete that video, you're deleting it from SharePoint. We then go clean up in Azure. So it's actually this really cool sort of hybrid system. And that was very intentional on our part. We wanted it to be SharePoint so that you as developers will interact with SharePoint the way you always have. The end user doesn't care, and yet the streaming experience is Azure. So another type of portal, I know at the beginning when I was randomly asking questions, someone said, what about Infopedia? So the other portal type that I want to talk about today is the knowledge management. Codename Infopedia. I'll just drop the code name. I'll just say Infopedia because codename Infopedia is awkward for me to say. Basically, it's a KM portal. It's the vision of how we imagine enterprises in the future managing knowledge in their O365 tenancy for their users. So it is a well-known landing place, much like the video portal is, right? Jeremy spoke about the video portal is a place that users will become accustomed to going to. They don't have to remember the URL. It's in the app launcher in your tenancy and so on. We imagine Infopedia is going to be the same way. Infopedia is going to be a location that will roll up things like boards. You've probably seen boards in Delve already at several other sessions. Microsites, there was a good session yesterday on KM and microsites. So if you haven't seen that session, you should go watch the video. But these Infopedia sites really roll up all these different types of knowledge management systems. We imagine that it's going to be very personalized. So Office Graph is going to allow us to give you content that is relevant to you, that is relevant to the things you're working on, to the people you work with, to the projects, and so on. But most importantly, we imagine that they're going to be incredibly flexible and easy to manage. And I think today, when you try and implement a KM solution, the real problem is, A, it's usually an 18-month committee process, right? Who's had that experience? Yeah, exactly. And they're anything but easy to manage, right? They may be incredibly powerful the way people implement them, but they get really, really complicated. And so what we've said is we want these to be really intuitive. They're going to be easy. They're going to just work from day one. So the way I think about knowledge management is I sort of split the world into two. I imagine knowledge management as being a people-centric thing, and that's really what Delve is about. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time here because there's a whole session on Delve. But from the people perspective, you think, I know somebody and I want to see the things they're working on, or I find something and I want to know who's related to it. And in that sense, you have articles and documents, or you may have collections, which we call boards, and you could have documents and other things that belong to a board. But this is sort of a people-centric view of the world, which is a little bit sort of lighter weight and quick and easy. Delve. We'll leave that. The way that I think about knowledge management and the way that we imagine implementing these portals is really a business-centric perspective. And so although it's the same articles and the same blogs and the same documents, Infopedia portal will allow you to organize all that content in ways that are meaningful to your business, right? So it's very likely, well, not very, it is absolutely the case that you're going to find the same document in Delve as you would in your Infopedia portal, right? They're both going to exist because depending on the context and how you're trying to navigate to it, it'll be there. But when you go to the Infopedia portal, it's going to be placed in a location deliberately. So someone has gone out of their way to curate it and said, this document belongs here. Here's a narrative around what this thing's about and how we intend to use it. It's structured in a way that makes sense to your organization by department or by project or whatever it happens to be. And the other big difference is that it's published. Someone made a deliberate choice to say, this is a finished product. Whereas in Delve, I will actually see my own in-progress work, right? I'll see drafts, which is great because that's what I want to see when I'm sort of looking at my own stuff. But in this case, you're going to say, no, these are approved, published, ready to go. So with that, let's do a very quick sort of imagine, if you would, what Infopedia might look like. And I say that because Infopedia is right now still a bit of a concept, right? So this is forward thinking. We've implemented a lot of the pieces that go into Infopedia. So you will have seen already a session that talked about microsites. You will have seen blogs, maybe, no, today, later? Okay, you'll see it later in the session. You will have seen boards. So the components that build up an Infopedia site exist. Infopedia as the highest level umbrella portal is still a little bit TBD. So, but imagine in this case, does this work? Oh, it does. Look at that. First time I've ever used one of these. I've presented for like 18 years. I've never, okay. So imagine a portal, and in this case, as I said earlier, it's all about it being a well-known location. So you want this to become part of people's everyday routine. They're looking for something, they need to do some work, they're going to go to the portal. They're going to get some things that are sort of well organized and personalized. So this content along the bottom here is going to be things that we maybe find in the Office graph, or things that someone deliberately sort of pinned onto that page and said, when you come to the portal, this is what you're supposed to see. And we want it to be easy to maintain. When you look at this is a little bit hard to see, but this article belongs to what we call a microsite called Home Collection. So does this one. They have the same logo. They have the same name. And so this notion of branding that says when you find content, you should be able to know where it comes from, know sort of the department or the source of that content and say, oh, I trust this because it has an HR badge or whatever it happens to be. So in this case, we're going to go and say, for this particular article, I can click right on it, and it brings me to the Home Collection. Now, I happen to have my menu expanded so you don't see the page behind it. It's usually not all white. There's actually color there. But what you're looking at now is saying, this is a section of my Infopedia. And you could have that by department, or you could have that organized as whatever your corporate structures are. And inside that, you're going to have navigation. These navigation we refer to as sections, and the sections have articles. Okay? The articles are essentially the modern version of a publishing page. And we're going to talk about how we create those pages and the experience for authoring the page. In this case, I'm going to go and click on that, the Olam collection, and now you're looking at a page. And we're going to look at this page in much more detail live in a few minutes because this stuff exists and is working and is actually available for people. So if you are part of our first release group on O365, you should have the blogging tool, which is essentially another instance of this same experience. But what you're going to get here is you have your content, you have related document. In this case, you have the WAC view, so you can actually click through the document. And you have auto-generated navigation in page, right? So this is not site-level nav. This is actually jump links within the page that we would auto-generate by finding the titles and the section headers and so on. So this is going to be really, really straightforward and easy for people to author. So let's quickly wake my laptop up.
I forgot something. Sorry.
We need someone to do something for us over there while I log in.
Thanks. Sorry.
And make sure you recognize his color shirt because we want to prove that it was live today. Okay, let me switch here. And there we go. Okay, so the article that we were looking at was part of a microsite, right? The microsite was called Home Collections. In this case, it's something slightly different, but that's fine. Microsites are not released yet, but they're live and working. So we have the prototype code. We're in the process of cleaning it all up and getting it ready to roll. It's going to be available over the next several months. At some point in the not too distant future, you're going to be able to make microsites. So a microsite is pretty cool. It's really just a roll-up page. So you can think of it kind of like the video portal in that it has an out-of-the-box roll-up page experience. It has built-in nav, so it shows me the articles. These were all articles, and it shows it to me in nav as well. And it has some inductive text, so you can say, hey, this site is about this, and this is how you're supposed to use this content. And then I could just go in here, and I can look at my page. And you'll notice a slightly different version than the one I had in my screenshot. So here my jump links are up top and not on the side. But effectively, it's the same thing. And it's just a very simple, easy-to-author page. The user is going to be able to go in, and I'm Molly in this case, and unfortunately, or fortunately, we'll get to that in a minute, Molly does not have the right to author here. And that's probably good in some cases, right? If you go to the HR microsite, you probably shouldn't be allowed to change the vacation policy for the employees. So in some cases, the author is going to be able to go in and create content and add a page, and we'll show you how we do that. In another case, we very deliberately say, no, this thing's locked down, and only certain people, certain parts of the company are going to be able to author. So the idea is, like the video portal that gives you a structure and just simply lets you use it and consume it, these microsites in the Infopedia Hub are going to give you an area where we say, this is how you communicate knowledge about topics with people, and please use it. It's not going to be start from scratch, create nav, create a term set for your managed nav, and blah. Like, we're not going to do that. It's just going to be out of the box, straightforward, ready to go. So with that, I did the demo. Let's talk a little bit about permissions. So I very quickly mentioned that Molly did not have the right to go and create her own page. That was a conscious decision. Not all users have all permissions. But we use the SharePoint permissions model behind the scenes. Jeremy's going to talk a little bit about permissions.
So, we had site collections, right? Site collections are a real important part of SharePoint. They would have been really hard for us to re-implement if we were doing the NextGen portals work. So we used what was out of the box. We're doing the same thing with permissions, right? We've got lists, we've got item permissions, we've got the container permissions as well. So we wanted to just use what already works. So all the stuff you're seeing, the permissions are handled the same way as every other permission in SharePoint is, right? The key is we're giving you a simplified experience. So you're not going to see quite the level of complexity of creating SharePoint groups, adding people to them, to manage these microsites and things like the video portal. So we set the permissions at the container level. So within a microsite, I can set up the authors, the editors, and the owners of the site to give, I think we have 3 tiers of permissions that we allow you to set. I think might be readers, editors, and owners. I think we'll see the screenshot in a sec.
And when you say might be, it's because it might change. So don't get too stuck on them.
Some of the UX that we're about to show, some of it's locked for the video portal as a V1, and some of it is about to be is the microsites, which is still evolving. They apply to dependent resources as well. So obviously all the articles in the microsite get those same permissions. But when we do things like images that upload, we set the permissions the same, so you won't get access denied on an image that somebody forgot to set. The same is not necessarily true of the documents. We want the documents to be referenced in their existing location. So if I add a reference to somebody's OneDrive and that person locks that document down, I am going to get that content disappearing out of the article that I wrote about it. But in most cases, that's exactly what you want to happen, right? You want to be able to manage the permissions, but still have the flexibility in these experiences to keep everything working. So we'll look at the experience. Like I said, it's not quite, this is the video portal. So this is our step one, right? This was our first out of the box, ready to go portal. And so the user experience is a step up from the SharePoint one, right? So we've gotten rid of the idea of you creating the individual groups of permissions. You still use individuals and Active Directory groups as the unit that you put in these boxes. And then if we look at how we're looking to do this in the microsites, we take it a next step further. And if you've seen some of the presentations on the modern groups, this design should look very similar. So again, we're going to a more simplified model, a better user experience that's just going to keep everybody happier instead of the old SharePoint admin pages, which never quite got the love that we wish they had. So we're treating these as first-party user experiences for all the admin actions. So we talked about the permissions. Let's double-click a little bit on the next level of architecture. So I showed you the high-level diagram earlier about kind of storage and the services we're creating. Let's go even deeper on that. So we talked about the hub. We've talked about the content site collection. So those are the two substrates that we're using. One per tenant on the hub, and then per channel, microsite, blog, et cetera, for the content site collection. So we provision those on demand, and we keep going as you create more and more of them. On top of that, we've got the server REST APIs. And before, we just had one big block, but here we're breaking it down a little more. You've got the core SharePoint APIs. You've got your doc APIs, your search APIs, the graph APIs. All that stuff that just comes out of SharePoint, the REST APIs, that's what we're leveraging. And then we're adding to it. So we've got a new API for publishing. So all of the microsites, the blog, the video portal, each of those have their own API spaces that when you want to do Dan's extend block on the earlier diagram, we will have the APIs there for you to be able to act against programmatically. On top of that, as I showed before, we've got our page renderer and authoring canvas. And in here, our new thing is new controls, right? So we've built a new control model. We've created stuff like the table of contents control that you saw that jumps you through the page, right? We've got the video player, images, the page roll-up controls. All those things are new controls that we built that get taken advantage of by our new pages. And then we've got the single page apps, right? So the microsite homepage, the article page, the video portal homepages, those are all built using single page app model. And really that shouldn't come as a terrible surprise because that's just the direction that a lot of web development is going. And we're trying to bring these portals forward into all the same techniques and tools that you guys are using, we're going to use out of the box. So there's a lot less proprietary technologies and things inside when we crack them open. The homepage and content pages are starred because that's where we're taking advantage of those controls. And we expect that model will ultimately be one where you can provide your own controls as well. So we've done microsites. Oh,
no, it's good.
Dan wants to.
I'm going to just interject just for a sec. So message from our sponsors. No, couple of things. We keep sort of hedging our bet slightly and saying it's not quite there yet, it's not quite finished, this is what we're thinking about. And I wanted to just give a little bit of context, right? The way we've always done this in the past is we go away for 3 years, and we come back and we give you something. And now with the service, it's just iteration is so much faster. And there was really not going to be an opportunity for us to talk to you between now and the time that this stuff shows up, right? In the past, I was going to have 3 SharePoint conferences between now and the time I ship. And so what we wanted to do is really give you a sneak peek, literally, on things that are close, things that are that we're pretty confident about, because this is going to be the only time that I get to talk to you before we turn it on. And so it's not that this is wishful fantasy thinking. This is the stuff we're working on now, and we're going to get this stuff done over the next few months or year and so on.
Yep.
Okay? So I just wanted to, every time I say kind of, maybe, if, I see people go, So, okay.
But now that Dan dashed your hopes, I can talk about something that actually is shipping this week.
That's right.
I'm so excited. That's why I banged the mic. So blogs is kind of another one of these portal types, right? And it's not that I'm stuck in the 90s and that's what makes me excited about blogs, but blogs is our entry into modern authoring, right? We're creating this new authoring canvas that lets you create the pages you saw in microsites. And we wanted to take a scenario that would be really useful to have a better authoring experience. How many people have actually used SharePoint blogs in the past? There's a fair number. How many people like the little tiny box that you get to pay? There is one, okay, she's shaking her head.
She knows somebody that worked on that feature.
Right.
That's why.
So again, this is an experience that is highly driven by how good the experience of authoring is, and authors want to have better control than we had before. So we created a new authoring experience. This is what's going to power microsites. It lets you create beautiful content easily. It's mobile, so it's fully responsive design across your devices. It lets you include all the standard stuff you'd want when you're authoring a page. We call it single click. It has auto save. The home page is responsive, and we'll actually see that in a minute. And we think that sharing is really important. So we do share by email, and it's by default open to the enterprise. So when you provision your blog, it's shared with everyone except external users. You don't have to worry about the permissions. In fact, we're not letting you change the permissions in the version that's shipping this week. This is going out to first release customers starting last Monday. Went to the first 3%, and we'll be ramping that up over the next couple days and weeks.
And the important thing is, you see Jeremy go through this demo, is for those of you who didn't raise your hand as bloggers, that's fine. This is the beginning of the authoring experience for microsites, the beginning of the authoring experience for pages and groups. This is the way that we imagine people create content in O365 going forward. So this isn't the first version. We're going to iterate. We're going to make it better. But this is the way we imagine people interacting in the future.
Great. So why don't I walk us through what the blog has to offer. And again, I'll talk about some of the architectural decisions we made and how we built a new content authoring experience using the existing pieces of SharePoint. So you'll see in the new Delve profile, I've got this module called blog, and it gives me a link to either all of my posts if I've got some, or a link to start writing directly if I know what I want to create.
What about all the people that have blogs today? Half the room raised their hand, which
So
frankly I'm shocked about, but
Yes,
that's awesome.
We are surprised, but happily surprised. If you have a legacy blog, I'm not supposed to call it legacy. If you have a SharePoint blog, it will show up here. There will be a link that'll let you get access to it. We're leading with the new blogs, but you're not going to lose access. We're not cutting them off or making them go away or taking away that functionality. As V1, this is an additive experience. So if I go to all the posts, which my browser will get to, I can see I've got a nice roll-up page here, right? I've got the card metaphor coming through from Delve. I've got rich thumbnails of my posts. The titles come through. I get status on what all of these things are, so I can see that some of these are drafts with unpublished changes. I get the date that the ones that were published are. Dan showed you earlier what kind of an article looked like, so I'm not going to go through the read experience, but I do want to go through actually creating a post here. So one of the things we wanted to focus on was giving you an experience that doesn't present you with a blank page when you hit start, right? Because a lot of people find starting from absolutely nothing to be fairly intimidating. So what we have is a stencil that adapts to which workload I'm in. So for blog, we wanted to focus on big images. That's the trend right now in external blogs. We wanted to put the focus right on the kind of content that people want. With a microsite, you'll actually see a different template when you start creating an article. It's the same canvas, it's just contextually aware for what you want to do. So I can add an image to the top here, and I'll grab one off my local machine. I could add from OneDrive as well. It'll populate with the most recently used files, I believe, in that top tab. So when I click add, it's going to upload it to the site collection for this blog. Again, just like microsites, just like video channels, these are, in fact, site collections. I've got some pre-canned text here because I'm really a furniture expert and I am concerned that we have single-leg chairs And I don't know, that sounds kind of tragic to me. If you look at the bottom part of this picture, they've got that flare thing. I don't know. I'm dubious at best. So I added my title. I could add a subtitle as well if I wanted to. And that's all stored as metadata for the post. And that's important to think about. I'm not really editing an HTML page here. I'm editing the data that we're going to store and then use to render out the page on the back end. I can paste in my content here. Because I'm in an in-private window is why you're seeing that security dialog pop up.
And it's in
your
private
environment
just for demo's sake so that we can not conflict with our cohorts in another room doing a different demo.
Yeah. So don't worry about it. That's not something you'll ever have to worry about. One of the things that I can do here is I've got text formatting. So when I highlight a section of text, I can do the basics, right? I've got bold, italics, underline, hyperlink. We've got numbered and bulleted lists in the version that's shipping out. We've also got header and quote. And so header and quote are interesting because when I make this a quote, it's going to create a new block. And one of the things that we're betting on for authoring is you don't necessarily want to have to worry about what is the thing that's going to make your quote look the best. So we've pre-formatted the quote block. And if I re-highlight this text, I actually don't get the same text formatting block. So we've got these predefined styles that we can apply. And what that means is as style trends change, we can actually update the service and make things update on the fly.
It's also important to recognize we've taken away a lot of flexibility for a very deliberate, intentional reason. We want to make sure that these things always look beautiful. And they always look beautiful regardless of the device. And so what we've said is we're going to take that responsibility, and we can argue about what beautiful means, and over time we're going to get feedback. I get that. But what's important is that you make your content, you have some control, bold and italic and so on, but the bulk of how it looks and feels and how we render on different devices, we're going to do that. You do not have to worry about that. So that's a big change in how we think about content moving forward.
Yeah. So
thank you.
I'm glad some people.
Half a person cared about that. That's great.
It's awesome. So when I want to add new content into the Surface, I can bring up a toolbox. It gives me access to the typical things I want to do: text, image, video, document. Video is video from Office 365. So if I use that, I'll get a thumbnail that'll take me to the video player. Eventually, we will have the embedded video player. When that capability comes online through the video portal, we'll be bringing that right in. I could add a document here, but I can also do that right from the default canvas. So we've added this control that lets me have a little file picker right on the surface so I can see without having to know where to go in the toolbox to get documents. So if I pick a PowerPoint presentation here, as Dan showed earlier, it's actually going to load the WAC.
You got to speak slower.
I shouldn't. It's coming.
There, see.
PowerPoint Online. So I've got rich document preview right inside of the post that I'm writing. I could change this into a card if I wanted to. And if all I really want to do is have a highlight and I don't want to distract people with the full content, but I can change it right back into the document as well. So up at the top, you can see we've got this little indicator in the upper left corner where my mouse is that says draft not saved. I don't like my draft to not be saved. So we've actually implemented autosave, and it is going to save here in a few seconds. We're on a timer, so we wait for the user to stop interacting with the canvas, and then the autosave kicks off. There you go.
Yay.
Post is saved. We're tweaking that time.
Oh, come on. Autosave in SharePoint? That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
When have you seen autosave in SharePoint before?
So this is all cool, right? I mean, this is pretty standard, I'm sure a lot of you have seen other authoring tools that are coming online.
We're not the first people to have autosave?
No, we're not. We're not quite the last, but we are not the first. But we are, one thing we are leading with, if we switch over.
Okay, let me switch over.
Maybe. If I keep refreshing.
Yes, look at that.
Like I said, we're mobile. So all of this stuff that we've been showing you is actually mobile-first responsive design. And I can go in here, and I've got my posts, and I can scroll, and if I resized my desktop window, it would do the same thing it's doing up here. I'm going to refresh one more time, because I really want that post to show up, but it's not. Anyway, I can come in here, I can take an older post, and I can actually go into edit mode right on my phone. So I don't know who's ever tried to edit SharePoint pages from a mobile device. I say try.
If you tried, you did it once. And
doesn't really work all that well. But I can come in here, I can hit the little pencil button, and I'm actually in the same full editing experience I had on the desktop right here on the phone. So I had Pat come up because I forgot to take a picture beforehand, and I can actually go in here and grab the picture from my device. I could have done this live with the camera, but I figured I'd save the few seconds for it to happen. And there's Pat. So I was able to take the picture with my phone.
Pat, stand up, take a bow.
Get it. And
oh, you're good? Okay.
That's how you go.
Pat doesn't like audiences. So
but it's right there.
We put him on the big screen.
And you can see this auto-saved as well, right? So if I come back over here to the desktop and look at that post.
Ta-da! Oh, I got a switch. Oh. It looked great on our laptop.
But it looks exactly the same. Great. So that's, I just went desktop to mobile, back to desktop, all in sync, all working flawlessly. Let's go back over to the slides real quick. And let's talk a little bit about Clicker. How these pages actually work. What makes up these pages? Well, like I said, these are data as opposed to HTML pages. So if we go through here, I'm looking at the edit mode. I've kind of got these different areas of the page. I've got a header at the top. I've got some rails on the side. And in the middle is the user content area, right? So anywhere that you saw the little hint that we call it to bring up the toolbox, that's where you can add content, and we don't mess with it. We understand the rules for how to flow it, but it's going to be your content, your control order that you put things in. The outside areas are where we control the Chrome. So if we decide we need to update the header to fix a bug or to change the layout because it's not working at a particular resolution, adding a new responsive stop in the system, we can do that. We can update the system without having to go change your content pages and have it reflect right in there. So if we look at inside, if I were to crack one of these open, it's a JSON blob. This is where we start to get even a little bit more geeky, right? So I've got at the top level, I've got post metadata with the title and subtitle, where the thumbnail is. If we look at the header, again, I've got that title and subtitle data that's kept all in sync. I've got the publish date, the author line that comes up. A text block is going to do the same thing, a bunch of code, and then the actual content that we're going to render back out. So this is all the data that feeds into the controls that are on the page. And then at the end, I've got a control map, which actually determines what order those controls are intended to be in. And the reason that's important for us, that we're separating out the JSON data from the page, the HTML that's rendered, and why we don't give you an HTML editing view, is so we can do that responsive design. By us taking control in these ready-to-go portals of the design, we guarantee that it's going to look good when you create the page. You as the author don't ever have to worry about, well, if I put this here, is it going to flow? Because the system is going to make sure that it handles that correctly. I pointed out autosave a little bit. So how did we actually do this? It sounds really complicated, really advanced. Turns out it's not, because what we really wanted was, we wanted drafts.
You have to tell them it is, because they're going to wonder why we didn't do it before. So.
Yeah, thanks. We wanted drafts. We wanted to prevent collisions between users and devices. So as I switched between the desktop and the mobile, we wanted to make sure that it was going to stay in sync. We wanted version history. And of course, SharePoint already has most of these features for us. We're just putting a new UX on top of it and making it work the way we want it to. So we've got minor versions. In the back end, we're doing check-in, check-out. You'll notice I didn't have to check in, check out at all when I did that and switched devices. It did it on the back end so that I didn't have to. So we can actually walk through what the sequence of this might look like. And the reason I'm doing this in slides instead of on the demo is just because it's easier to visualize. This is what that live code that is shipping out this week actually does. So I go to my desktop and I start writing. When I autosave for the first time, I create that 0.1 version on the SharePoint list. So until I actually autosave, I don't have a list item to manipulate. Once autosave triggers, then I'll get my first draft. I decide I want to go get a coffee. Well, I'm at the coffee station. The Microsoft coffee machines take a while, so inspiration strikes. I pull out my phone. I want to actually add the abstract title here while I'm waiting for the coffee machine. And the page version increments to 0.2. So it actually knows that I'm the same author on 2 different devices. It checks in the 0.1 version. Because the autosave happened, I'm not losing any context. It checks that in, it creates the new version and checks it back out for me. I autosave again, so I'm still on 0.2. I go back to the desktop. The same thing happens, right? When the code will trigger, it will look at the server version, say, oh, version 0.2 is there. Let me bring that abstract block into the authoring canvas. And then I can add the quote, and I'm at version 0.3. And when I publish, I go into the read view for that post, and I'm at version 1.0. Rich text is the last kind of secret to doing a really good authoring canvas. It looks great. You know, we've got a really good looking font. We've got control over everything. So we wanted to support the common formatting bits. We wanted to have control over what to expose. If you're used to the traditional ribbon in SharePoint, there's like 80 gazillion things you can do. But most authors probably only use the 5 or 6 that we showed most of the time. So we wanted to have a locally contextually aware toolbar for you. We wanted something that was easy for us to extend and really was well tested. So we didn't want to have to rebuild the text engine. And it turns out, of course, the SharePoint Rich Text Editor does all this stuff. And it's really awesome because you may not know the SharePoint Rich Text Editor that we've shipped in 2010 and 2013 doesn't just power SharePoint. That powers Outlook Web Access, and it powers Sway. So if you've seen Sway earlier in the week, they're actually using our text engine underneath for their text blocks on their canvas. So that's really the start of our journey on modern authoring. We're starting in blogs. You'll see it in microsites very soon. And we're going to keep going as we expand the capabilities. So that's what's now. What's next?
Okay. So I promised at the beginning that we would do a sneak peek into the future. And so let's see if this works. We're supposed to be able to... Here, crystal ball, we rub. Oh, there you go. Okay, so over the conference, we've had a lot of people say, oh, you got this authoring canvas, and it looks like Sway, and you got Sway, and it kind of looks like the authoring canvas, and what's going on, and what are you guys doing? And so what I want to talk about is really modern authoring in the enterprise. We really believe at Microsoft that authoring in the browser is the way things are going to move, right? People are going to author on their phones, on their desktops, on their mobile device, on their laptop, whatever it happens to be. And there's going to be new experiences. And we really believe that there's going to be many new experiences. And we have 2, and they're both in Office. And there's going to be more probably. And there's going to be third-party partners someday. They're going to deliver other ones and so on. And we're going to embrace that. Like, I think it's totally okay that people are going to author with tools that are specific to the thing they want to do in a way that they want to do it. That said, they need to talk to each other. So, SharePoint and Sway this week, we both made big announcements. We have our new blogging tool that's rolling out the door. The Sway folks already are out in public, and they announced that next month they're going to be in the enterprise. I think that is great. They're available, and it's super awesome. That said, I think it's really important that we acknowledge the teams need to talk to each other, and we're doing that. We're doing a bunch of work to figure out what we're going to do moving forward now that we have these 2 different experiences. And they're different for a good reason, right? Like in the enterprise, most of the time you want your content to be a certain way. You want it to be structured. You want it, and yet there are parts of that content experience that you want to be flashy and really cool and sort of modern and with all these great experiences and so on. And so both sides need to figure out how to work with the other. And so what we're talking about, and this is really sneak peek, early thinking, you folks, 200, 300, 400, I don't know how many people are in the hallway, are really the first people ever to hear this story. So hopefully it resonates with you, and I'd love to hear the feedback. But we're talking with the Sway folks and trying to figure out how these teams are going to work together. And the one thing that I want for my authoring canvas is to make sure that if there's functionality in Sway that you would like to be able to use in your authoring experience, that it's available. And the inverse, I think, is equally important, that if you build a Sway and you want it to be able to take advantage and be controlled by your enterprise content management systems, SharePoint, it needs to be able to do that as well. So imagine a world where we have our authoring experience. This is, our authoring canvas in O365 that's backed by SharePoint that you just saw Jeremy walk you through. And where's my little target there? Imagine that you could sway this page, right? So I'm going to go in, and rather than having this sort of up and down, a little bit boring single column.
Hey, I just spent a lot of time building
I know,
a single column.
A beautiful single column. Imagine that I hit that sway button and I get, who's seen sway this week? Okay, so you might recognize this panel. Imagine that rather than picking the vertical, I picked the horizontal. I could pick a style. And now my page is going to look and feel like a sway, right? There's a bunch of technology that happens in the background. We could imagine we take our page and we send it to the sway engine and they return a sway and we get a pointer to the sways. We don't need to worry about how and why and all of that. But as an experience, we imagine a world where this page that is still sitting in SharePoint, that is still authored through the new O365 authoring canvas, could leverage the sway experience. And when I choose to edit, what we're going to get is we bring you right back to the authoring experience where you created that page originally, right? So it's not like you started in one and end up somewhere else. It's you create your content in an experience, and then you choose to have a different rendering of it, and you could make your edits and then once again go back and say sway this, or maybe we'll be smart and auto sway it for you if it was swayed the first time, and we'll figure out all the details. But we imagine a world where content that is sitting in your NextGen portals could leverage the look and feel of what the sway engine does. So I think that's going to be super cool. And you guys are falling asleep. Okay. Okay, there you go. You just have to nudge them a little. Applause now. No. Okay. The other part of that is, imagine that you start from sway, because I think it's going to be a very cool consumer experience that people are going to bring to the enterprise. People are going to be used to using these sways, and they're going to make them. And then at some point, you're going to want to manage them. And so you could imagine that your clicker works. You could imagine that you're in sway, and rather than just publishing it to the sway location, so sway.com, or publishing it to Facebook, which they allow you to do. In the enterprise, you probably wouldn't do that. But you might want to say, up here I hit publish, and publish is going to give you an option that says, oh, where would you like this sway to go? And you could put it as part of your blog, or you could put it into a microsite, or you could put it as part of some other SharePoint location. And that's the way we imagine you being able to use both of these tools in a single world where you say, I have an Infopedia, my Infopedia manages the content and how we communicate within the enterprise, and yet I want to use these tools that don't necessarily sort of obviously work with SharePoint, but because the teams are talking to each other, they will work together. And that's sort of the vision that we have from the SharePoint and the Sway guys. Does that sound cool? Is that like something people... Cool. Okay. So that's my little spiel on the future of something you should expect to see in the not-too-distant future, Sway and SharePoint playing nicely together. So the next part, and I have to do this one more time, right? Yeah, rub the crystal ball. And, oh, there's our custom panda again. Okay, so custom next-gen portals. So we talked a lot about the ready-to-go portals. Those are the portals that we're going to just give you, and hopefully you guys are going to use. And you're going to use them out of the box. You're going to configure them, as I said at the beginning. You might extend them by adding parts and so on and controls. But at some point, we imagine people are going to want to go custom. We get that. We imagine that you're going to do custom less and less because our out-of-the-box stuff is going to get better and better, right? As we see the kinds of things that people are investing in when they build custom, you can imagine that not that far down the road, we're just going to ship that as part of the out-of-the-box experience. So that's just the evolution of the service. But when you need to go custom and go do some crazy new thing, this is the way I imagine the world over the next few months, few years. It's still a little bit up in the air exactly how the roadmap's going to flow. You're going to be able to reuse the building blocks that we build, right? So you saw a bunch of controls around our new text editing control, the navigation and page control, the roll-ups and all of that, we're going to give you the ability to repurpose those in your own custom experience. We imagine that anything that you build custom should be able to integrate in O365 as a top-tier sort of portal. It's not as though my Infopedia portal is somehow more important than your custom HR portal, right? They should be peers. They should appear both in O365 next to each other. Maybe you choose one to be the parent of the other and so on. All of that mechanics we're going to work through. We also recognize the open source movement, and we recognize that NextGen UX is probably, I'm not committing to this, but we're seriously thinking about making our NextGen UX experience open source. So we believe that's not a commitment, it's an idea. But it's an idea that I think, frankly, we believe in, and we just have a bunch of mechanics and policy that we need to get through. But I believe the value of what we give to you is our API, our storage, and our enterprise content backend, right? The UX experience, if someday we figure out a way to just put that on GitHub and let you guys take it and play with it and extend it and use it on-prem or do whatever you need to do with it, I think that's great. I think it's goodness. I hope that we'll get to that point. That's how we imagine custom to go in the future. We imagine, therefore, you'll be using industry standard tools. You don't have to go use some proprietary magical SharePoint thing that we've done for you. It's just going to be the things you usually do. We also imagine that the custom stuff that you build could be hosted elsewhere, but it doesn't need to be. It should be able to be hosted in O365 in SharePoint next to your other portals. We imagine that it's all going to be client-side rendering. That's the way we build our portals. That's the way we're going to help you build your portals. The technology is all going to be JavaScript, CSS, REST APIs. So there should be nothing sort of surprising, other than maybe it's surprising that Microsoft is talking like this. But from a technology point of view, there should be nothing surprising there. That's it. We have about 8 minutes for questions. Before we move on, I want to remind people that there's a survey that you all received on the way in. There's also evaluations, which my boss really looks at. So if you could do me the favor and do Jeremy the favor of filling them out, giving us honest feedback and opinions. Happy to take some questions if you want to step up to the mic. Thanks, guys. And there's other sessions. Questions? Yes, sir. Move quietly while we answer questions.
Yeah, will any of these new authoring capabilities be offered in on-prem with responsive designs?
Okay, so the question is, will any of these authoring experiences be offered on-prem? The ready-to-go portals are not offered on-prem, as I mentioned earlier, but we imagine a world where the experiences themselves, the UX, might be available as open source, in which case you'd be able to take it on-prem and go crazy. Yes, sir.
What about public sites, like having a public blog?
So public sites are not really a focus right now of O365, and therefore public blogs are not. External sharing and having partners and customers come into your blogs, that's something that could be done, but public facing is not really the business strategy right now for O365. Yes, sir.
Where do you see metadata and specifically...
Everywhere. Where do I see metadata? I dream metadata. I built the metadata service. That's 10 years of my career. We're not exposing it here in the same way that we're not exposing a lot of SharePoint here. We've decided to start with sort of the minimal viable thing, and we're going to start unlocking SharePoint functionality as the scenarios that we choose to ship and focus on require them. So first stage, there isn't any, but the service is there. The metadata part is going to be integrated at some point in the future. I just don't know when. Yes, sir.
For permissions, you were showing a simplified screen. Does it now, or will it actually use groups as a permission model?
So the groups show up as Active Directory entities. So I believe you can actually put a modern groups identity into one of those boxes and it will share it. We're actually, so we didn't talk about it, but we imagine that groups will very soon get pages or a blog. And so we expect that without having to do, did you?
I said pages and groups.
So without having to do sync, we can use the same
told
Active
to.
Directory object for permissioning.
Yes, sir. We'll try and go back and forth. So right here.
So I was wondering, with regards to the blogs, what level of API support? So, for example, could we potentially build something that surfaces the blog post of these 10 people and using the rendering engine?
Yep, absolutely. I don't have the specification of what's published, but the intent is that anything we do in terms of getting posts, showing posts, all that stuff will be accessible. I actually did one of the things that I've done internally so we could track our dog food usage was I used the content search web part and I aggregated it all. So it's also all through search. Those content items all show up and you can pull the content out that way. So I don't have the specification of the API, but the intent is that yes, you would have a rich API that is fairly common across all of these different types of either blog or microsite. They would all act very similar.
We're gonna move really quick because we have about 4 minutes and then we'll take it outside in a polite, nice way.
So we turn this around the other way. If I have a SharePoint site, I've got it set up with content types, documents, and everything else. Can I use these pages on those sites?
So right now, no. Our pages sit
That's
in
my
the...
job gone. Next.
No. So right now, no. But as I said, as we start making the experiences available and sharing the source code for the experiences, you'll be able to do that.
Yeah, but in the meantime, people still need sites and they want more complexity.
Yes, and that is actually sort of an intentional strategy. We're not trying to replace the old stuff. It sits and does what it does because people have invested a lot in it. This is parallel to it. We need to find a way to converge and we'll get there. This is early thinking right now.
Okay.
So, yes, we'll do one more and then one more over there and then we're going to call it.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. That guy, you, and then we'll call it.
And we'll be at least I'll be at the booth later if you guys want to.
As you start to create spas for each of these different experiences, would it be reasonable to assume that features like lists, as an example, will have some sort of client-side methodology for plugging in?
It's absolutely reasonable to imagine that the controls that you would be able to add to these pages will be a list view control or some next-gen version of that. Yes?
So the next-gen content's being saved back to a site collection. So as an admin, if I'm looking at the SharePoint admin center and seeing all the site collections, is that hidden or is that being available?
So the site collections, the admin experience we're still working through. Right now, the way that the site collections are being provisioned, they won't show up necessarily in the admin center. You can access them through the API, so if you have PowerShell scripts and things, you can get to them, but they don't show up in the admin center to see them.
Last question, and then we're going to be outside, and then we're going to be at the booth.
So with Office Video and going into Azure Media, is there any limitation on file types and sizes?
So file types and sizes that are managed by Azure, I don't have a list off the top of my head. It's an ever-changing list. File size, I believe, is like 10 gigs, but don't quote me on that. And the video media types is an Azure thing that they're constantly adding. And frankly, that's why we went to Azure. We want to get out of that business. SharePoint is not going to be up to date on the latest and greatest video format from your fancy phone. The Azure guys are.
Yep.
Okay, I apologize. I'm going to cut it off just because the room needs to get ready for the next. We'll meet you outside. We've got to take our mics off. Thanks, everybody. Please fill out your surveys. Score us high, even if you don't mean it.